Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of TekXpresso, where we serve quick, insightful, and engaging tech discussions. I'm your host, Veer Varma, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Anil Kakani. He's the Vice President of the Algorand Foundation and the country head of the Algorand Initiative. With a background in finance, sustainability, and blockchain innovation, Anil has been the forefront of driving impactful change across several different industries. His work spans around economic empowerment, digital transformation, and sustainable development, making him a key figure in shaping the future of blockchain adoption. It's an honor to have him on the show. Let's dive right into the conversation.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Mr. Anil Kakani, and in this episode, we're going to talk about three big topics: how government policies have shaped economic inclusion, how innovation spreads through funding and regulations, and how Web3 technology is creating new opportunities, especially for young people. Anil, thank you very much for being here. Let's get right to it.
Awesome. Great to be here, Veer.
All right, government policies play such a huge role in shaping economies and opening up new opportunities. It's interesting how different policies can either accelerate or slow down innovation in today's times. Anil, during your time in government, you worked across several different fields, including economic inclusion. Could you share more about your role in government and the policies you worked on in those areas? And how did that experience shape your current work in blockchain and crypto?
Sure, Veer. Thanks again for having me, and happy to start with what I consider is the foundation of my professional career, which is my years in government. When I worked in government, it was really with the perspective of I worked on low income programs, sometimes referred to as anti-poverty programs. And we spent billions and billions of dollars here in America and across the globe on trying to reduce this challenge we face of intergenerational poverty, right? How do you increase or improve connectivity between people and the labor force so that they, don't end up on, below the poverty line, needing to rely on government programs. Now, there's lots of, reasons that aren't solved by strengthening those networks and connections to the workforce. Healthcare, behavioral health, mental health, physical health, some of those things that don't just get solved by, creating more jobs. But what I learned was, there's a large segment of the population that for whom those connections are weakened for a host of reasons. And after initially working on, like the programs that were there to create a safety net, I began to focus more on how do we strengthen linkages between people and the workforce, right? And we learned over time that the linkages are broken because of lack of trust, lack of access to finance, lack of access to markets, lack of access to service, whether they be healthcare services, childcare services, you name it. So, I mean, I worked across all of these issues that were really focused on how do you bring more access to capital, more access to finance, so that and how do you create trust so that people can get more connected to the labor force? So that was where I began. And we can talk in a second about, I don't want to hog the whole conversation, but we can talk in a second about how I went from there to, crypto and blockchain, which is interestingly a very, people don't think about it as a technology that can help solve some of those problems, but it actually is very central to the kinds of solutions I'm hoping to see take shape.
Yeah, that's really interesting, your amazing work that you've done throughout the years. And um I feel like I don't think like a lot of people, especially like younger people like me, realize how much government policy like actually impacts our daily lives. We hear about like laws being passed, especially in recent times, but we're not always able to connect them with like things like financial access, like what you mentioned, jobs, or even like technology we use. And with the help of like blockchain and crypto, I feel like this will make this will make it a lot more accessible. And a lot of people like my age, like especially like think like crypto as it's digital money or something people just invest in, but it's clearly like a lot bigger than that. And
It
um
is.
the yeah, and the idea that it could help more people get like access to financial services or even just like make transactions more fair and transparent is like really something that like is like really hard to hear about, and I feel like it could be a really new space for people if they actually like learn about it and dive into it. So if you want to
Yeah.
mention that a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So if you think about it, Veer, historically, people make money based on the work they do. right? And jobs kind of come and go from an area. And if you look at America or any country, you see economic rejuvenation, revitalization come to areas and jobs leave. And you see people's, lives go up and down as a result, right? And that used to be especially the case where you had large employers and everybody worked for these large employers. And, you obviously had some small businesses that are kind of the backbone of the American economy. And then over time, you saw this huge, this gig economy that was created, right? And we thought that things like, Uber and all these kind of Amazon, these things that were appeared to be sort of decentralized, where I can take whatever asset I have and figure out how to monetize it, right? I have a car, I have a home at Airbnb. I have a ticket to a concert. I could resell that on StubHub. But really, what happened is those became kind of centralized platforms, right? That took all of our data, took all of our information, made money off of it. And we, the worker, ended up getting a smaller and smaller share of that. So, what we've seen is like, and these are all, there's policy associated with all of this, right? So you say, how does government affect our daily lives? It's, the protections of workers, the healthcare that you get if you qualify for things like Medicaid or other programs, because those, instead of being seen as necessarily anti-poverty programs, they are work supports. They're the things that if an employer can't provide it, then it's something that the government helps provide so that you can hold on to that job, right? And so, long way of saying, technology over time was not, for me, I'm a policy person. Technology is a tool, right? It's a tool to help achieve the objective, whatever you're working on, whether you're trying to make a widget or whether you're trying to increase a person's, connectivity to the labor force. Technology is just a tool. So for me, in my work in government, the people I work with it wasn't, there was nothing partisan about it. We live in such a partisan environment today. But truly, I mean, my belief always has been people who go work in government or, whatever company, they believe in whatever they're doing, right? And so, so the objective when you work in government is how do you make these government programs work better? How do you actually help, use tech or use funding or use good people to achieve that, objective that the government program was set out to achieve? So, that's the role that that's where I come at blockchain from, and we can talk more about how blockchain, helps solve that problem of trust. Ultimately, the reason people end up in and out of jobs or can't get a job based on where they live, or can't get a bank account, or can't get a loan, or can't take their product to market is because there's a lack of trust. People don't, know who they are, what they are, whether they're credit worthy, whether their product is actually what they claim it is, whether they have the training they claim to have, right? And blockchain comes in because it can help solve that problem of trust. That is, for me, kind of the transformational aspect of blockchain and what attracts me to using it as a tool to solve the same problems that I was trying to work on when I was in government.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The role of government, it hasn't been it hasn't been fully trusted yet, and we haven't been able to understand how the government is able to impact our daily lives. And that's something definitely that I still don't understand. I'm pretty sure I still don't understand. A lot of people don't understand, but we definitely know that it plays a role in our lives, but we're not able to appreciate and um understand
Well,
how it really does.
there, you go to a public school, right? Or do
Yes.
you go to, I mean, so
Yeah.
it plays you take a road to go to your school, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who do you think built those roads? Who do you think, built
Yeah.
that school? I mean, that's all, you go to a library to check out books still today. I love going to the library. That's
Exactly.
government.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our taxpayer dollars at work, but that's government at work. And, when we go to a national park, when we go get on a plane to fly somewhere, I mean, that's government that's providing the infrastructure, the support. Again, government is us. It's the government of
Yeah.
the people. So we pay for that, right? But ultimately, and this is again where blockchain really comes in. A lot of these solutions there are dependent on, on a program that's being run locally, right? And so eventually, that like the ability to scale that program means government has to spend more on that problem, or to help, allow it to serve more people. Now, how great would it be if, because that person who lives in Edison, New Jersey, where I know you live, was able to borrow money or raise capital or sell something to someone who lives in, Hyderabad, India, right? They can't, in the world we live in today, there are borders and there's, lack of trust because I don't know who I'm borrowing or who I'm selling to, in that market. And so as a result, I'm constrained by the economic circumstances of the town I live in. Now, if I if I had a reputation, right? If I had a reputation that was built on chain, right? That was immutable, that was transparent, that I could trust, right? Or that someone else could trust. So they could invest in me for whatever I was creating, right? Back in Edison. Or from Edison, I could invest in that person because they had a shop that I think was going to do really well in Hyderabad. I didn't have to know them, but
Yeah.
this problem of trust was resolved, and that's where blockchain comes in. And so dependence on government, because I don't have those connectivities, I don't have those networks to, get access to capital. That's why, again, I'm not saying blockchain is a solution to everything, right?
Yeah.
If I have, health issues, or if I don't have access to childcare, but those are problems that we still have to solve as a society. But if I could get my product to market, if I could, sell something, if I was a developer sitting, in my town, and I didn't have to be dependent on a large, tech company coming and, setting up shop there, but if I could offer my services and I had a reputation, a public reputation that was, transparent and immutable and trustworthy on the blockchain, that's where the value comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. The blockchain plays a really big role in understanding and having people's trust. And this leads well into my next question, which is speaking of policies, there are so many factors that influence how innovation spreads, whether it's funding, regulation, or collaboration between the public and private sectors. And some of the biggest breakthroughs we've seen, like the internet or even AI, were influenced by government initiatives. And can you share like a specific example of how policy decisions have influenced the diffusion of innovation, whether through funding, regulations, or public-private partnerships? And additionally, how do you see Web3 technology contributing to the economic growth and fostering greater inclusion in today's economy?
Sure, it's a great question, Veer. And so let me say, again, my when I was in government, so this has less to do with tech than it does, innovation, right? Innovation always happens when you allow people to innovate, right? And so when there are fewer strings attached, and so one of the balances you constantly face when you're in government is if you're spending millions, if not billions of dollars for a purpose, then you want to make sure that that money is being spent properly. And actually, there's a problem of trust there that that blockchain can actually help address, right? Because I'm giving money to private actors that are all over the country, all over the world. How do I know that that money's being used wisely, or not wisely, but in accordance with the rules and regulations that I've set forth? But I would say, a piece of, innovation that I feel like I saw take place that I was witness to was in America when we reformed our welfare system, right? We actually changed the way we gave cash benefits to low-income people. There used to be an entitlement. They changed it to what's called a block grant, and which meant states got so much, X amount of dollars to spend on, services that were approved services, but they had a huge amount of space to innovate on how they spent that money in order to keep their caseload, the number of people that were on, on what we called welfare benefits down. So that meant you spent more money on labor force supports, right? Job training, giving people healthcare. Oftentimes, like you lose your healthcare if you start making too much money, right? You go off the program. So, but that makes no sense because
Yeah.
oftentimes people lose their job because they get sick or their child gets sick
Yeah.
and they can't go to work. But if you actually gave them access to prescription medicine or to a doctor or to all the other things that help keep you healthy, then I want to provide that, right? So massive amount of innovation happened all over America when we gave states more freedom to innovate to help keep people connected to the labor force. So, that's for me, that there was a tremendous amount of innovation there. But I mean, there's so many examples of innovation being seeded by public investment. And, I would also say if you really want to do something transformational, it happens with government. I mean, government doesn't always isn't always the most innovative, but the scale at which government operates, right? If government says yes, this is a good thing, that's and invest money into it. That I mean, it's hard to compete with that. It's hard to get to take that level of take that kind of innovation and scale it to the extent that you can when you have that kind of government intervention or support. I'm not arguing for more government. It's more, how do you get government to support and invest in innovation? Because when you do, you see great results.
Yeah, yeah, government, yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, government policy like does play a role in innovation, and um we always like hear about like how big companies are like individual like inventors. Um we always hear about like big companies or individual inventors, but like a lot of the progress comes from like decision made behind the scenes, like what's getting funded or like what's getting regulated or like what opportunities are getting created for people or different for different people. And in my opinion, like Web3 is like also like really interesting because like it seems like it's trying to like change the way things have traditionally worked or how it was working in the past. But like a lot of the new systems in today's time, whether it's like banks, social media, or like how people are buying things online are controlled by just like a few big are controlled by a few big companies like
Yeah.
Uber Eats, Uber, DoorDash, like all those things. But Web3 seems to be like offering like something different, and people have like more control over their money, their own data, and even the communities they're a part of, which is like so cool to like to anyone that works in the space, because like this is a new thing which was never like experienced in the past, and this technology can make things a lot more accessible and transparent. And if you'd like to give like a few
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. The role of Web3 technology, they talk about decentralization, but also disintermediation, right? So you remove middle people, again, because you're solving for that problem of trust. And you also, as a consumer, especially your generation, right? I'm old, and what I think you people like you are, the hope for our world, right? Because you are going to be more adamant that the product you buy is a sustainable product, or it's a healthy product, or that it's coming from someplace, or you want to buy something, you want to support something that is sustainable, that generates, or maybe you want to buy carbon credits to offset your footprint, but you want to make sure it's going to a certain type of household or a certain community that that really you feel good about. Web3 empowers you to have that knowledge, to make those decisions. And in a world where people have, strong preferences, they're conscious about these things, right? You don't want to buy something that is being made by polluting, or that's using child labor, or maybe that's, produced by a company who's got a CEO that you just don't agree with, right? You have that power to be like, hey, I don't want to buy from that. I want to buy from here. Likewise, if you have a product and you want to sell it, right? I mean, you have the ability. Nowadays you can, because anything can be tokenized, right? And so
Mhm.
you don't have to have millions of dollars to invest in a company. You might be like, hey, I want to invest, like, with my allowance or my, $100 I made in babysitting. I want to invest some of that in this kind of, sustainable handloom weaver based in Assam, right?
Yeah.
And we've done that. We've been out there and we've seen how blockchain can help, support these women who are, who are making authentic product, but who get, wiped out of the market because there's a intermediated, kind of inauthentic product being produced for cheaper. But I don't want that. But I don't know, how to differentiate between the two.
Mhm.
So that's, Web3 gives that kind of opportunity that I think for your generation, people are going to be more adamant to have more information. I want to know more about what I'm buying, what I'm consuming, or who I'm investing in. So I think, I mean, that's the excitement for your generation, of consumers, because you believe in that, and you want to have control over your own data, and you want to be able to, sell your product to whom you want to sell it to, not who Amazon or someone, enables you to sell it to, or Facebook, whatever marketplace or whatever. Those are very centralized places that,
Yeah.
you sell your data, you sell your soul to
Yeah.
that platform. You don't own anything, like, and that's what Web3 helps, I think, solve for in a way that we haven't even discovered in the world. Not when we hear all this talk right now about, strategic reserves and crypto and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not, the beauty, or the promise of blockchain to me is the utility of the technology, right? That's where we're going to see the most exciting, innovative things happen in blockchain. It's not, just the buying and selling of tokens, which of course is important, but in a place like Algorand where I work, it's, the algo is a utility token. It's a token that's used to, to power transactions on chain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like I completely agree with like how like our generation like likes to keep our data secured, and likes to have our data like with us, like know what we spent, what we did. You know what will be secured. You know nothing will happen, no scams or anything, because there are a lot of scams nowadays with like phones and like everyone like getting your bank account and all this stuff. So you need to be secure, and Web3 definitely plays a huge role in security. And
Well, I mean, we hope, obviously there's been lots of kind of bad stories come out of the blockchain crypto world, because, it's a complicated system, right?
yeah.
Your private keys, all that stuff. So I think we'll get there. I don't think that speaks to the technology. I think it speaks to like people's, lack of awareness, full awareness of how to use the technology. But I mean, of course, we all hope that those negative stories don't tarnish the technology, and, kind of the potential for blockchain. But when we say, oh, blockchain is so secure, yes, it is. The tech is, but there have been instances, and, not all techs are as secure as others, but there have been instances where, of course, people have lost a lot of money.
Mm.
But that's just because, you got to be really careful when you get into this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing, not everything could be secure to its fullest, but yeah, blockchain is definitely a huge, definitely a huge security, and which is definitely a good security, and is definitely a big part of the future. And this does help lead to my next question, which is like a lot of young people like today want their work to like have like a meaning. They're not just looking for a job, they're looking to make an impact in the space. And we've seen that with like movements around climate change, issues, and like even the way people are like thinking about their careers. So, as the vice president at the Algorand Foundation and country head of India's Algorand, how do you think Web3 technologies can empower the younger generation who are increasingly focused on their impact of their work? And how does the mindset connect with the trends and development you're currently seeing in the India's innovation landscape?
Yeah, I've got to say, I have the privilege of working in India, and, the world's largest democracy with a massive young population. So while I think the great opportunities here in the U.S., and, as I said, my foundational professional work was here in America, um, it's so exciting to watch. And we've got Algorand blockchain clubs that, I think over 80 universities across India, and most of these are, set up by young students who begin to understand blockchain. They're computer science engineering students who are developers. I'm not a developer, so I feel like, I get to do a little of the inspiration, but I don't really get to teach them the tools. But I do see, so many young people, like you said, want to, they've got to make a living. So we're not talking about, come and, have, engage in philanthropy. But the thing about, blockchain is you get to own your work, right? You don't have to, I mean, the power of open source, right? I mean, we love talking about how, build something, make it open to the public, establish your, reputation by having your GitHub repo and, your repository so people can see what you're building. Let that be your entry into the Web3 world because your work gets recognized by, people who are looking for solutions, people who are looking for, integrating their solution into another platform or, whatever it is. But that to me is, what's unique about the Web3 world is that you can kind of, chart your own path. You don't have to say, hey, okay, here are my 5 jobs that I can, go do. But at an early age, at your age, you're doing these TekXpresso sessions where, you're getting to create your own path to a certain extent. But then if you think about if you could build something, if you could, do some coding and, kind of test it out in the market, see what, you don't have to do a finished product, right? And to me, like if we could help, bring jobs back to where people live because people can sit where they are and develop a solution that can be utilized in another place. And I see, hey, that's Veer in Edison, New Jersey. I like what he did, and I can now pay him to do something more, or he can consult for me on a project that I need his solution for. That's and at Algorand, the young people, if they look at the types of solutions right around, I mean, we really push this concept of creating a more inclusive economy, sustainability, financial inclusion. How do you use DeFi to achieve those objectives of greater economic, empowering people to more fully participate in the global economy, right? To be more, full economic participants. Um, Blockchain, enables people where they are to be a participant. You don't have to move to a big city or go move to where the large company is. I can see what you're building, I can see what you're developing, and the solutions you're building, are sustainable. They can solve a problem of market access or, whatever. There's so many solutions that are being built on chain nowadays. In Algorand, we see things from, tokenizing airline tickets to, payments to, disaster struck regions of the world, humanitarian disasters or natural disasters where payments are happening to tokenization of real estate assets, fractionalization and tokenization to people earning carbon credits. Blockchain enables that to happen, without having to know who the person is that's generating that carbon credit, right? Because you have certain KYC information that's available. You can have that trust without actually knowing the person on the other side. So that for young people, I think that's really exciting. I think it's cool to be like, hey, I can build something and I can own what I build, and people will recognize me for what I've built, and and income can be generated through that.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And I think like a lot of people of like my age, like teenagers, high schoolers, the idea of like creating something meaningful, whether it's a small business project or like even being part of like something that like actually helps people is like super important. And it's not just like about making money anymore. Like people want to like feel like we're actually like doing something that actually matters. And when it comes to blockchain, I think it's really exciting because it gives people more opportunities to like be independent, like you said. And it also seems like it's opening doors for people to like build things on their own, which will play a huge role in a lot of successful careers in the future. And it works directly with others who have more control of who have more control of their work. And
I just want to say
like
on that, you also, you find, we used to do, and we still do put these efforts into like hackathons and things. And the purpose is you come and you find people to build something with, right?
yeah.
In India, we talk about cricket diplomacy, where, countries that are sparring or at war, they come together for cricket, and all of a sudden, like all those issues go aside because we're playing a game together, right?
Yeah.
Likewise, I hope that, by developers who are building something, from different cities, different countries, different parts of the world, you can find, build a team of people from all over. And, and again, it's a really cool, aspect of the decentralized, world that blockchain, fosters.
Yeah. And I also feel like curiosity is like a huge factor into space. And because it's just like not because not enough like education like because there's not enough education on it for people like my age. Like we hear about crypto, NFTs, and decentralization a lot, but we're not like fully able to understand like what it really means like in real life until we if unless we actually explore it on our own. But like I feel like if more people actually learn how blockchain and like Web3 works, it could be a huge skill that they could learn in the future. It could be a huge skill that they could use in the future, and it would get way more young people interested in it. And it's just like not an investment, but like actually something they could like build upon for their future.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an investment in yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you're interested in something, right? If you want to be a the best baseball player in the world, what do? You go up on a mound, and if you want to be a pitcher, and you work on your changeup, you work on your your third pitch, or if
Yeah.
you're a batter, right? I mean, so if you want to do this, yeah, you have to invest the time and energy into it. But
Yeah.
that's life, right? Find
Yeah.
what you are passionate about and invest the time and energy to become the best you can be at it. So I do think that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in the Web3 space because you can, there's so many ways to find tools online to start learning. And for Algorand, again, not to kind of toot our own horn, but like our focus is real world applications, right? Building things for scale. And there are things about our platform like instant finality and high transaction throughput, and very low transaction costs that make Algorand really fit for purpose for applications that affect our everyday life, right? That we can use for for things that we already do. But where it's really exciting is for people, like us, in America, or that most things we have access to, right? I turn on the light, I get my light switch. I want to buy a ticket, I go online and I buy it. So, it doesn't lend itself as much to disruptive technology the way, the people at more on the margins of society, right, who don't get access to all those things. Or if I talk about India, if you look at what, an average family, what kind of a lower income family pays for things like healthcare, for electricity, for education. It's a
Yeah.
large percentage of their discretionary income relative to what we pay here, because actually a lot of those things are taken care of by government, right? We talked
Yeah.
about earlier, how does government affect our everyday life? And in other areas that don't have that kind of infrastructure, people pay for that, right?
Yeah.
People pay out of their pocket and they don't get a very good solution. So
Yeah.
there's a huge opportunity for for disruption, for technology to play a disruptive role. And that's going back to what we talked about earlier. It's like technology is a tool. It's not the end, but it's a tool that can help achieve, hopefully, for folks, and we got to believe that people want to achieve good things, right?
Yeah.
Good measured, differently for different people. But technology is a tool to help achieve things that, that are, that we think make the world a better place, or that can, increase productivity, increase income, increase quality of life. Technology is a tool. It's not the end, right?
Yes, absolutely. Technology is never gonna, I don't think it's leaving anytime soon, and definitely won't leave anytime in the future. So, and it's amazing like the work that you're doing, everything. Like it's definitely giving a lot of people inspiration and confidence that there is protection, there is security, there is someone that is like there's someone and something that is like looking after what you've worked, looking after what you're going to work on upon. And this has just been a great conversation like throughout, and thank you for like sharing your insights. It's been like really interesting to like see how policy, innovation, and Web3 blockchain like it all connects. And I think like all these like kind of discussions that are I think these are the kind of discussions that get like young people thinking and what's possible in the future. So thank you very much, Anil, for coming.
Sure, Veer, thanks for having me. And again, I hope you keep doing these. It's important for people to understand, all the different facets of technology. But for me, I'm a policy person. I come from a policy background, and I really believe, uh, I mean, I think we all should believe in our government, but I really believe that government plays an important role in improving quality of life, for everybody, for us, but especially is critical for people that live on the margins, right? That have don't have that access to financial services and markets and things that make their, as we mentioned, their connectivity to stability, to jobs, to income, to things. It's important that we use technology to help strengthen those bonds and lift everybody up. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about this with you, Veer, and I commend you for putting the effort into these sessions.
Thank you, thank you. I hope to have you in future episodes. This was an amazing experience, and I hope the viewers definitely learned something from it.
Thanks. Me too.